everyone, welcome to the Hobby Lobby Creative Studio. I'm Sarah. Well, are you ready to learn how to knit? It's really a lot easier than you might think. I've got a great, easy to follow tutorial to get you started, so don't go away. Well, one thing is for sure, knitting is definitely making a comeback, and rightfully so. It seems like people of all ages are knitting these days. You really can knit so many cool things, and you only need a few supplies to do a knitting project. Some yarn, a pair of knitting needles, some finishing needles, and a pair of scissors, of course. So we need to talk about yarn and needles first off. How do you know what kind of needles to buy? Well, there are lots of different needles out there to choose from. Lots of different finishes available as well. So it's really fun to experiment and find out which kind of finish that you prefer. A lot of beginners choose to purchase some 10-inch long bamboo needles like these here. Bamboo needles are really nice to use because they're not quite as smooth, shiny, or polished as other finishes can be, which means that your yarn is just going to stay put a little bit better on these needles and not slide around quite as much. And trust me, as a beginner, you're going to appreciate when your yarn slides around as little as possible. If you're wondering what kind of yarn to buy, look for a medium weight yarn with a smooth texture. How you know it's a medium weight yarn is indicated by this little number 4 here on the label, right on top of this little yarn icon. And then just make sure that it's got a smooth texture because you're going to be able to see your stitches much more easily that way. Save those fancy fuzzy yarns for later when you've become more comfortable with knitting. The first thing we ever have to do when starting a knitting project is to cast on. There are a lot of different methods of casting on, but no matter which one you choose, what you're essentially doing is creating a foundational row of stitches for the rest of your piece to be built on. So I'm just going to keep it really simple for you today and show you how to do the easiest, I think, of all the cast on methods, which is the single cast on. This is a really easy cast on for beginners to learn especially, and it really allows you to get some stitches onto your needle very quickly. So let me show you how to do that cast on now. The first thing we do when we cast on is we make a slip knot. To make a slip knot, just work at one end of your yarn here. There's lots of different ways to make a slip knot, but I just like to use my 2 fingers and wrap the yarn all the way around them once and then halfway around again, and then put this piece of yarn through this loop that you've now formed on your fingers and pull it through, and then you should have what looks like a piece ribbon. So in this loop now, insert your knitting needle. And now the working piece of yarn, which is still the piece of yarn that's attached to your yarn ball or your yarn skein, should be the piece that when you pull on it, it tightens up this slip knot. So if it's not, you've just got it reversed. So just take your pieces of yarn off, reverse them, and then tie your slip knot again, and you should be good to go. So with your end of yarn here, we're going to tuck that away and just keep a hold of it with our right hand. Then we're going to pick up our working piece of yarn with our left hand and just kind of drape it over your 4 fingers just like this, leaving your thumb free. Now go ahead and close your fingers around your yarn, and you've formed what looks like a thumbs up. So from this point, you're going to scoop your thumb onto the front side of your yarn, wrap it all the way around the back, and then return to that thumbs up position. Then you're going to dip your needle inside of this loop that you've now formed on your thumb, start to push it through, and then release your thumb completely from that loop. And then return to that same thumbs up position and do this again. So you're going to scoop, rotate all the way around till you end back up in your thumbs up, scoop this into your loop and release your thumb completely, and pull it so that it's just a comfortable fit on your needle. So this is really a quick way to cast on. It's very simple and easy. And if I could give you a piece of advice for this cast on method, it would be to make sure that your stitches stay nice and loose and comfortable on your needle. You don't want to pull them so tight that they are squeezing the life out of your needle. You just want them to be nice and loose and relaxed on your needle, because what you're going to be doing is going into these stitches whenever you knit your first row. So the more relaxed your stitches are at this point, the easier it's going to be to get your needle through your cast on stitches. Now that you know how to cast on, it's time to learn a couple of stitches. There are two basic stitches of knitting, the knit stitch and the purl stitch. So this is what a knit stitch looks like. It kind of has the look of little V's, doesn't it? So let me show you how to make the knit stitch now. To do the knit stitch, I've already got my foundational row of stitches set up on my needle using our cast on method. And now what I want to do is concentrate on the stitch that's the closest to the tip of my needle. So what you're going to do is, with your right needle in your right hand, you're going to insert your needle through the front of the loop, pushing it to the back side, and you're going to make what kind of looks like an X at this point. Then you're going to pick up your working piece of yarn with your right hand, wrap it around the back needle counterclockwise, and then you're just going to kind of push it through the front of this loop. Now you just want to slip that stitch completely off of your left needle, and now we have a stitch on our right needle. So let's do that again. So now we're going to concentrate on the next closest stitch to the tip of our needle here, and we're going to insert the right needle through the front of the loop. Now that it's on the back side, it makes kind of this X shape like this. And then you're going to take your working piece of yarn and wrap it around counterclockwise. And then you're going to push it through back to the front side of your left needle, and then slip that stitch off completely of your left needle. Go in from the front of the loop, wrap around counterclockwise, push your right needle back under the front side of your left needle, and then slip the stitch off completely so that it ends up on your right needle. So this is probably the most difficult part right here, is knitting into the very first row of your cast on stitches. But don't worry, that's what I'm here for. I'm going to walk you through every step of this, and it really just takes a lot of practice to get it right, and a lot of patience too. I promise anybody who ever started knitting had plenty of jumbled messes to show for it when they first started. So just practice, 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 and I promise that eventually it will just all click. Let's talk about the purl stitch now. This is what the purl stitch looks like. Kind of looks like horizontal links in a chain, doesn't it? So let me now show you how to do the purl stitch. Once again, I've just got my single row of cast on stitches on my needle. And before we do any work, what we want to do is actually pull the working yarn to the front of our workspace, because we were previously working with it back here with the knit stitch. But now we're going to be working on the front side of our needle, and so we want to complement that and bring the working yarn to the front side as well. So after you've done that, you can take up your empty needle in your right hand, and this time what we're going to do is, still concentrating on the closest stitch to the tip of the needle, we're going to insert our needle from right to left now on the front side of the left needle. So find your way through that stitch on the front side, and we're going to make an X shape now, just like we did with the knit stitch, but now the right needle is on top of the left needle. So with our working yarn here at the front, we're going to wrap it around counterclockwise, and then push it through that stitch to the back side, and then slip that stitch off of your left needle completely. So now we have a stitch on our right needle. So let's do that again. We're going to go into our stitch on the front side, right to left, wrap your yarn around counterclockwise, and then push that stitch through the back side and slip that stitch off of your needle. So purling, very similar to the knit stitch. You're just working on the front side of your left needle instead of the back side. Whenever you're done knitting your project to your desired length or whatever length your pattern is called for, it's time to do what we call binding off. Binding off is done across your entire row, and it results in a nice, clean, finished edge that won't unravel. So an easy and effective bind off method is called the basic bind off. So let me show you how to do the basic bind off. To do the basic bind off, what you're going to do is knit the first 2 stitches here on your left needle. So go into each one just like you're doing a regular knit stitch. And transfer that stitch to your right needle. So there's 1. 2. So when you have 2 stitches here on your right needle, what you're going to do is use the tip of your left needle here and go into the stitch that's furthest away from the tip. So your second stitch here. And then you're going to kind of pull it up and over your first stitch here. And then drop it off. And now you're left with 1 stitch on your right needle. And then you're just going to repeat that so that you end up with 2 stitches again on your right needle. So go into the stitch again just like you're going to knit it. And now it's on your right needle. And then again with your left needle, bring that back stitch up and over the front one, just like that. And you would do this across your entire row. So when you're at the point where you've gone across your entire row and you've got 1 stitch left on your left needle and 2 on your right needle, go ahead and pick this stitch up like you were doing before and bring it up and over the front one. Now you're going to, once you have 2 stitches left here on your right needle, again, you're just going to bring the back one up and over the front one so that we end up with 1 stitch left. So when you're at this point, pull up slightly to kind of make a larger loop right here, and go ahead and clip your yarn. And now you can pull that yarn through that loop and pull up just like that. So now we're ready to weave in our ends. So when we're done with a knitting project, we have an end left where we just did our binding off, and then we have an end left at the beginning where we did our cast on stitches. So what we need to do is weave in those tails. And why we don't just leave them loose or cut them off at this point is because we just want to make our edges more secure and weave them in so that the edges are nice and strong and that it doesn't unravel. So I have a little finishing needle here, and these are really handy. They're very flexible and they open really easily. So just insert the end of your yarn through the center of your finishing needle. And then what you're going to do is just weave your yarn into some already existing stitches. I like to go across the edge because that's typically where your stitches are the thickest, and it will camouflage those ends better than another spot on your project. So just go into some already existing stitches here across your edge, and you could do this until you've got all of your end woven in, or you could just do it enough times where you feel like it's nice and secure, and then you could cut it off at that point as close as you can to your project. So you would do this on both sides, and that's how you weave in your ends. Well, that's all for today, everyone. I'm sure glad you stopped by and gave knitting a try with me today. Keep practicing and keep those knitting needles moving. Take care, everyone. We'll see you next time.